In today's show, we're looking back at the season from the Oklahoma City Thunder and what it means moving forward. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. If you haven't seen it, earlier this week, I did a show talking about settings for fantasy basketball leagues. I think you'll enjoy that, of some changes that I'm going to make in some leagues, and I think you should too, to try and eliminate some of the problems that people have with fantasy basketball leagues. Yesterday, myself and Noah Rubin gave our top 25 players for dynasty leagues out of the last 3 draft classes, so you can check that list out as well. And I know that Matt Lawson and Jason have been throwing out some of their own top 25 lists on Twitter, so you can check that out. And today, we're looking at the Oklahoma City Thunder. So, warning.
Let's get it on, Gilly.
All right. Should mention it. Mike Budenholzer fired by the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll see what happens with his position, or who fills it, and if he gets another job at all. That did seem like writing was going to be on the wall, but he's still a really good coach. But some playoff foibles are a genuine concern with Budenholzer, and that's reared its head multiple times. We'll see where he ends up. Let's talk Thunder, who again, this is one of those things where there's so much talk, there's so much 100%ing, there's so much certainty. I can't draft a Thunder. They're just going to tank, and they're going to shut everyone down, and in fantasy playoffs, they're all going to be useless. And it's fine to think that maybe that happens, but in general, you cannot be sure of it. There's no certainty around so many things. And just writing, the amount of times I heard before the season, the amount of times I heard during the season that the Thunder are tanking and sitting everybody, so I'm never drafting them or never touching them ever again. They've tanked for 20 years. It's a perverse narrative. Perverse is probably the wrong word. It's pervasive. That was just false. It was 2 years. And again, they only started to sit guys through March and April in those prior years. But it was 2 years that they did this. And people just say it's a disgusting franchise. They do it forever. It's just blatantly untrue. But you hear one dickhead spout it out, and then it gets amplified, and someone else believes it and goes forward from there. And even then, when Shai had that injury late in the season, and they said, we're going to be careful with his minutes, and he might sit some back-to-backs, but we're trying to push through, that people would still come and go, well, this is, of course, they're saying that as if you believe what they say, Josh. He's definitely getting shut down. You've tried to gaslight me into believing the Thunder aren't going to tank. See, we all knew it was right. And see, it wasn't. And my point with this is not to say that teams don't sit guys down the stretch, and in April we know solutions for fixing this, but it's going into a season with preconceived notions that you've bought into based on a whipped up social media frenzy about what a team is doing that you just don't know. And this is 2 years in a row, and I'm probably missing some other teams in here, but 2 years before it was the Cavs. Well, they're trash. They're gonna tank. No one's going to do anything, and they didn't. And now it was the Thunder this season. And it's going to be other teams next season. The Pistons, the Rockets, I don't know. But we act like we know 100% what's happening at all times for all teams, and we don't. And it leads to a lot of errors. They were 40-42. Imagine. Now, I thought that the Thunder would be pretty good, and I was pretty adamant about pushing back against the tanking narrative, as you're all well aware. I did sour a little bit on someone like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander because he had a knee sprain before the start of the season, but didn't stop me from being interested in drafting him. But I also didn't think they'd win 40 games. I know they've got a really good coach, probably a top 5 coach in the NBA, in Mark Dagnall, and when they start to get more talent in, they're going to be really good. But 40 wins is not what I expected. 40-42, they lost in the play-in. They won the first play-in game, they lost the second one. 40-42 with a net rating of 0.6, that was 15th. They were 16th on offense, 16th on defense. Their best lineup with players who remained on the team all season. They did have one lineup better than this, but it had Mike Muscala in it, and he was gone. So it ended up being Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, Jalen Williams, Luguentz Dort, and Kenrich Williams, who ended the season early due to a wrist surgery. He was really good all season. So it's their main 4 guys, and Kenrich. We'll talk more about their weird center rotation policy later on in the show. But yeah, that's a pretty strong lineup, and I don't think that's a surprise to see that those guys were their best lineup. In terms of free agents, they've got $37 million in cap space coming up. How aggressive they are in pursuing free agents, I don't know, because they obviously don't have a ton of roster spots. They've got one unrestricted free agent, Dario Saric, who was pretty poor for most of the season, started to play okay at the end, but would they prioritize bringing him back? He sort of just fits into that, hey, we've got a bunch of undersized centers with Robinson-Earl and Kenrich Williams and Saric, but now they're going to get a legitimate tall player back in Chet Holmgren. So I don't really know if there's a priority in bringing Saric back. They've also got a team option on Lindy Waters III, who I think is, I know is a really good shooter. And I think there's a chance for him to develop into an okay rotation player. And I think they'll pick up that team option, but there's no guarantee he sticks. There's just so many guys, as you'll see, on this team who fit those positions, and they sort of go back and forth on them that wouldn't have huge hopes for him. They have the 12th best lottery odds, of course. There is a chance that can jump up really high into the lottery. It's a very low chance. There's like an 86% chance that it stays at 85. They've got, about 8% chance of getting into the top 4 and a 7% chance of being at number 13. So they're basically going to be a pick 12. And based on my mock draft ADP database, that would be around the range of a Keontae George. Not a bad player. Nice guy who'd probably sit in as a reserve on this team. A little bit of upside. I don't mind that. They've got 2 early second-round picks, Jaylin Wilson at 35. Bloody hell, please do not pick Jalen Wilson to go with Jalen Williams and Jaylin Williams. Please don't do that. And then at 37, Brandon Podziemski, who I think there's a chance goes a little bit higher than that. His value across a bunch of mock drafts is all over the place. It's like 26 in some, it's 45 in others. I don't mind him as a player. Shout out to his dad, who started following me as well for some reason. Brandon Podziemski, not a bad player. Like, I think he's got some upside and would fit on this team, but I'm not sure he'll be available at pick number 37. Question comes from Uma Zam. I hope that's correct. I'm going to ignore most of that first part because we'll talk about the Jalen Williams stuff later on. But how does Chet Holmgren affect Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's stock? And I'm going to use this question from you, Uma Zam, and I'm going to twist it. Because, yes, it's fine to talk about Shai and how Chet influences him, and I don't think he influences him at all. But the others, yeah, there is an impact here for Chet Holmgren coming back. We didn't see Chet Holmgren as a rookie, obviously. Chet Holmgren is going to be a player that I'm very interested to see where he ends up being drafted in fantasy drafts. You saw on the Dynasty ranking show yesterday that myself and Noah both had him in our top 6 for Dynasty players out of the last 3 years, even though he hasn't played yet. This is a guy that probably, to me, on a per-game basis, is a third-round player next season, would be my guess. At worst, a top 50 player, I would think. But it's not going to come from usage, I don't believe, and I don't think the team is going to sacrifice Shai's 32 usage to get it to Chet. The usage comes from others, but more importantly, the minutes come from others. So the worry you have is, Lou Dort. We know Giddey and Shai and the Bronco are going to start. We assume Chet will start. We probably have to assume that Dort will be the other starter. But if they jump up and get pick 2, pick 3, then Dort won't start, I don't think. So the thing's going to be his impact on Pig Williams. It's going to be his impact on Robinson-Earl. It's going to be his impact potentially on Giddey. It's going to be his impact on Dort. It's going to be his impact on the Bronco. It's going to be his impact on other players pushing through. I don't think it impacts Shai at all, but I do think that Chet is going to be their second best fantasy guy next season, would be my guess at this early stage. Because again, he's out of mind. We didn't see him play. But it's an unbelievable fantasy profile this bloke's got. And they won't push him to 35 minutes a night, I wouldn't think. But even in 27, 26, I think he's going to be really impactful. So it's just a reminder that that's a big question mark as to what the impact of him, plus an 8% chance at a top 4 pick, what that does to a lot of the other guys who are good, but can they withstand the introduction of elite prospects? That's going to, when we're talking dynasty for this team as well, that's going to be a problem. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time that you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that your part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Broncos country, let's ride.
eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to US customers, eligible items only, and exclusions apply. Okay, let us look at players. Let's look at S to the GA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was something that I talked about on this show last offseason a lot. And did I know that this was going to happen? No, but I did say that if you ended your fantasy playoffs on the date that I suggested on March the 10th, in total value over that time frame, Shai was the third ranked player. I said that a million times. My major point was for everyone who said, well, you can't draft Shai because he's never there for your fantasy playoffs. My pushback was, well, actually, if you set a reasonable date for your fantasy playoffs, he was unbelievably good. Did I know that little stretch of form would bring him to be a top 5 player overall? No, I didn't. Especially when he entered the season with an MCL sprain. But he was great. The signs were there in hindsight. I didn't read them that way. I had him, I think, 19th before the MCL, and then I had him like 32nd after the MCL injury. So, yeah, I would have smashed with that ADP. Had him at, his ADP was 49 because people will shit themselves. And again, one of the things I did really make clear is there is no guarantee he's even missing a single game to start the season, whereas people were just ruling him out for months on end. Again, the hyper reactivity of people to hear something and just be like, well, that's it. It's over. He's not playing. He won't play till Christmas, and then he'll sit down the All-Star break and you get 20 games out of him. It's just, for some reason, there's just a lot of hatred around the Thunder. Now, that'll go away now because of what happened this season, but you can be sure that sort of thinking will apply to other teams. Shai was 4th in category leagues, 4th in -1 ranks, 6th in points leagues, ADP of 49th, one of the best picks you could have made. And no one's picking him in the top 10. He will go in the top 10 in every single draft coming up. Is it a smart move? Well, let's have a look at what he did. He's 25, so he's not even in his prime. 68 games, 36 minutes, 32 usage. Cool. That's fine. 31 points, a 3. He doesn't hit many of them. He hit them at 35%. He just doesn't take them. He has been one of the league's best. Actually, he has been the league's best and most frequent driver, I think, over the last 3 seasons. So it's not a surprise that he's able to score as much as he did without hitting threes, because that's just been his game the whole way around. He just did more of it. 5 rebounds, 5.5 assists. No reason that can't continue. I think the thing that was really interesting here was 1.6 steals and 1 block. We know that steals are quite fluctuating year on year. So does 1.6 go to 1.2? Does 1 block go to 0.7 blocks? That's probably what takes him from 4 to 9. The shooting also. 51% from the field and 91% from the line on an absolute shit ton of attempts. One of the things that really brought Shai to be one of the best players in the entire NBA. That was, free throw percentage was Shai's best category. And he got there on 11 attempts per game because he is the best driver in the NBA. But again, if he hits 87%, an unbelievable number on still that volume, that goes from a positive as a 3 Z score to a 2.6 Z score. Still good, but every one of those little things. So 1.6 steals becomes 1.4, 1 block becomes 0.8, 51% from the field becomes 49% from the field. 91 from the line becomes 88 from the line. All those things bring him to 11th or 12th. There is just so many, and I'm not saying Shai's bad, obviously. All of these things with Shai here are awesome. He is awesome. Look at his advanced stats, like 98th percentile, 99th in wins. Darko only had him 28th, which is an interesting thing to look at. 91st percentile on LeBron, and there's huge improvements. But he had so many unbelievable increases in performance this season that if you take him top 3, he might finish 10th. And that's not bad. I actually don't care about taking a bloke third and he still finishes first round. It's not the end of the world. But I wouldn't say that any of this, I wouldn't say that defensive stuff and that efficiency from the field and from the line is guaranteed at that level. It's still guaranteed to be good, but at that level. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4 different things where I just say, well, 2 of them could very easily slip from excellent to very, very good. And that does impact things. Not scaring you away from it, but just it's always important to be aware of that, I think. His graph is great in his fantasy point stuff. You can see those few games missed down the stretch there with a couple of back-to-backs. Still really good, obviously, but did sit a couple of back-to-backs down the end of the season. And his EPM graph, he was strong all season. He got to the line a ton. He was awesome. Like, no one's debating this. He's a clear top 10 player in dynasty leagues as we move forward. Probably a little bit higher than that. He's going to go in the first round of every single draft next season without any hesitation whatsoever. I'm just throwing out some issues where we go, well, there is a realistic scenario where maybe we drop a little bit here. But if you disagree on that with Shai, do it. Also remember, he's done this for 70 games. All these things came together for 70 games. It hasn't happened for 3 years, even though he was great in that fantasy playoffs year before. All of this as a package happened for 1 season. So to buy it at that level every single season, now he could also get better and shoot 53% from the field and go 95 from the line and attempt 14 free throws a game and block 1.4 shots. Seems really unlikely, but it could happen. But I'm just throwing out things to just be cautious of when thinking about Shai. The next player was Josh Giddey. 66th in category leagues, 41st in totals, 51st in points leagues. He had an ADP of 58. Now, I think I had him in the 60s, and there are a lot of people who are very anti that. Well, he's not going to shoot threes. He's going to have bad field goals, bad free throws. He's going to have high turnovers. There's no way you want to draft him there. Now, I was pretty excited about grabbing him around that spot, and that worked out pretty well to me. He's not immune from criticisms, obviously, and there were weird games where he played 27 minutes. There are other games where he played big minutes. He only ended up playing 31 minutes. He's still super young. I tweeted this out today. He is 1 month younger than incoming likely top 3 pick Brandon Miller. And he's had 2 years NBA experience. So he's going to start the year the exact same age as Brandon Miller. So as an incoming rookie in terms of age. That's unbelievable, yeah? 76 games, 31 minutes, 24 usage. He averaged 16.5 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 3, 0.8 steals, and 0.4 blocks. And I talked about this yesterday with Noel. You go, well, he's only hitting 1 3, Josh. Yeah. But we're all going to suck off Jaylin Williams. He hit 1 3 a game as well. Shai hit 1 3 a game too. Like, that's a criticism, but it's not exclusive to Giddey. It's across a few of these Thunder players. His value is assists, rebounds, scoring. He hit 48 from the field, which is a huge improvement. 33 from 3, which is a huge improvement, and 73 from the line. They're not perfect numbers at all. But when we're trying to look at where Giddey fits in the prospect hierarchy on this team, I would say that there's a chance that he's 4th. Behind Chet, Shai, do you count Shai a prospect? I don't even know. And probably Jaylin Williams, even though he is a year and a half younger than Williams. So that 24 usage, I'm more worried about him losing usage to Chet and maybe another high lottery pick than I am about Shai losing it. So while he was great this season, and there are clear room to improve areas, 3-point percentage, 3-point volume, steal volume, I'm not going to bank on it. His advanced numbers are actually not good when you compare those numbers. 338th in Darko. And the Darko improved. He improved a lot, but he's still a wild negative, which I don't think I expected. Well, I definitely didn't expect heading into looking at these numbers. So I like Josh Giddey. I think he's one of the best passers in the NBA. I love his size. I think he's improved defensively. He's not great. He's improved, though. And I did have him relatively high on my Dynasty ranking prospect list. But I don't really know how confident I am in everything that he does and how they can prioritize him. That's, again, leads to some concerns. I'd like to see more 3-point shooting and more defensive stats. He was obviously really durable, 76 games. So you can see that on that fantasy points graph. He played well, put up good numbers. And then his EPM graph wasn't great, improved as the season went on, had a bit of a dip towards the end of the season. So his advanced stuff wasn't probably where we want it to be. Let's do the next one.
Broncos country, let's ride.
Just a huge surprise. I was surprised. You were surprised. And if you weren't surprised, you're lying. Because there's no way that you head into the season and you go, Jaylin Williams is going to be the 76th ranked player. He was drafted at 143rd in only 5% of leagues, so barely not drafted anywhere. He was a name to watch for me, and I did, I'm not going to claim it as a win because I didn't have Jalen Williams as a top 100 player, but I did say I reckon it could be January by the time he overtakes Lu Dort. I didn't expect they'd play him as a power forward, but he's very clearly better than Lu Dort already, so I did have some faith in him. He is older, obviously, he's 22, entered the league a little bit older, and there's some weird things we're going to look at here with him. 76th in category leagues, 56th in totals. I believe he was top 30 over the final 2 or 3 months of the season where he would put up some unbelievably good numbers. Like, unbelievably good. The thing that's not worrying is the wrong word, but you don't see many of these big discrepancies where his per game category rank was 76th, his -1 rank was 103rd. And what does that mean? It just means that he was very average across many categories. Some might think that's a good thing. Some might think it's a bad thing. It means that he didn't have any huge negatives in his game, and he wasn't fueled by big positives. Although his steals were probably the best in the NBA over the final third of the season. He averaged 14 points with a 3 on 36% from 3 shooting, 4.5 boards, 3 assists, 1.4 steals, half a block, 52 from the field, 81 overall. What really fueled that run where he was like top 25 in the final 6 weeks or top 30 over the last couple of months or whatever it was, what really fueled that was insane steal numbers and insane efficiency. And steals, we always have the worry, are they replicable? Can they persist year on year? The answer is, as a general rule, you can't rely on it as you can with other stats. Doesn't mean it can't happen. But when you are going to get variation, the most likely spot for variation is steals. Efficiency, look, obviously really good. He was unbelievable. He played 30 minutes a game with 18 usage. Could easily be 21 usage. Could easily play 33 minutes. He's got perhaps future sort of sub-all-star upside. I really like him as a player. But I do fear that people will look at the end of the season ranks from last season, the last post-All-Star break numbers, which were great. And much like that earlier question from Umar said, is ADP going to be 30 to 40? And I think it will be. And I think it'll be wrong. But not wrong, because an ADP can't be wrong, because it's where people are drafting. I think it'll be an over-evaluation of where he sits moving forward. I don't know where I'm going to have him ranked or projected or anything like that, because there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. And I do have him, again, pretty high on my Dynasty prospect rankings. But I do think there is maybe going to be an over-reliance on the post-All-Star break numbers from the Bronco that leads people to think that he's on the trajectory to be a top 20 or top 25 player regularly. I'm not sure that I'm in on that. He's good. I like him. He improved tons. His advanced stuff is pretty good. That Darko graph is impressive, pushing up to being almost a positive. He's at -0.2 there. His EPM's at -0.3. His estimated wins at 4.1. These are all unbelievably good numbers as a rookie. But we look at this and go, well, a lot of things the rookies struggle at are efficiency. You can't bank on an improvement on 52% shooting. You can't. So what is it? Can you bank on better steal numbers? I don't think so. Can you bank on more usage? That's probably where it comes from. More 3-point volume, more usage. 18 points, 1.7 threes, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. That's really good. That's really good. I don't think top 30 is a realistic push for him as we move forward. It could be. But I think if you're picking him there in drafts or expecting that to be the norm from Williams, I don't know. I'm not in on that. His last 18 games, he was 36th. Actually, look at his last 30 games. 31st ranked player. 17 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Well, they're the numbers I just said. 53% shooting, 86 from the line. That's all really strong. By far, the best category that he had by an over 3-to-1 ratio was steals at 1.9. That had a Z score of 1.87. The next highest was free throws at 0.5. So it's steals. It's all steals. And that always leads to, again, fluctuations. If 1.9 over the final 30 games has a season where he's at 1.1, then he's the 80th best player, the 70th best player. Everything else was really solid, really good, very few weaknesses. Think Rudy Gay. Less scoring but higher steals. But if the steals don't maintain, then we lose a little bit. And the way we can also tell this is he was ranked 104th in points leagues and 76th in category leagues. When the steals don't count for as much, and efficiency doesn't count for as much. Fantasy points graph was great. And again, it sounds like I'm shitting on him. I'm just trying to provide some realistic ideas of what can happen with Williams, rather than just like, well, he did this, so therefore it just keeps going. Or it improves, when there's not a guarantee of that. The EPM graph is really impressive as well, except for a little bit of a drop towards the end, where they had a couple of troubling losses. But is he good enough? Is he the foundation? I don't even know what I call this test, the foundation test. Do they look at it and go, well, nobody is taking that role away from him? Whereas if they get Taylor Hendricks, or they end up with Brandon Miller, do they say, well, sorry, we've already got Jaylin Williams? Not to say those guys can't play together, but is he that guy? I don't know. I don't know that he is. And I really like him, but I think I had him on that Dynasty prospect list. I just think we need to be understanding that there were a couple of weird situations this year, playing out of position, playing without Chet, playing without a million lottery picks. I still think he's probably a higher priority than Giddey. But so much of what happened post All-Star was on the back of literally league-leading steal numbers that you always have to sort of dial that back a bit when projecting. Let's look at Poku, because they're the only three guys, Chet not included, who are top 100 players at all. They're the only guys who mattered for most leagues. Poku still remains a curiosity. He started some games and he definitely was better this season, but then they had that leg break. 181st in category leagues, 182nd in points leagues, 139 ADP. Started straight out of the gate. He's still only 21. He's insanely young. 21 minutes, 18% usage, 8 points, a 3, 5 rebounds, 0.6 steals, 1.3 blocks, shot 37 from 3, 63 from the line. Had a few moments, but it was infuriating having him on your team, 26 minutes, 12 minutes, foul trouble, injuries. And people look at this one go, can him and Chet play together? Sure. Will they? Probably not. Poku is still really young. He's younger than Jaylin Williams, as you can tell by the ages. But yeah, I did see something interesting from a Thunder beat writer saying, in terms of the guys they would view as relatively untouchable, and Poku was on the list. It was Poku, Chet, Williams, Shai, and Giddey. I don't know that you should have that thought about Poku. And while he did have some improvements, the advanced stuff is really bad. Like, it's still really bad. 26th percentile EPM, negative in estimated wins, 410th in Darko. Like, they're really bad numbers. And while he did improve, he's still quite bad. And I don't have, despite the youth, despite the fact that he was looking better and playing all right before the injury, I'm not really convinced. And you can see just how wild on this fantasy points graph the inconsistencies were for Poku. The massive ups and downs, the fact how closely tied to minutes his production is something where you go, well, it means they need to be gifted playing time to produce at that really high level. And the inconsistencies are frustrating. So while he is young, while he does have an intriguing fantasy skill set, I don't think it's going to happen. His EPM is, again, really nice improvement at the start here. Dropped off, started losing minutes. Of course, his absence or his injury opened up more for the Bronco to get in there, and then missed basically the end of the season, so we didn't really get to see much there. So he was improving, but I'm not convinced. Let's get on to this guy.
No, my son is also named Bort.
Midwest Dylan Brooks, Lou Dort. There's not enough attention that gets put on how destructive this guy can be offensively. I put the attention on it, as I did for 3 years with Dylan Brooks, and it finally caught up to him this year. So am I going to start a hate campaign on Lou Dort? Not really. But I do think that it needs to change. He was 189th in category leagues. He's just a bad fantasy category player. This is despite starting and playing 31 minutes a night. Like, he's nowhere near a 12-team league guy. In a points league, he was 136th. That's not that great. He played 74 games. He is 24 years of age. He's still a solid defender. He's not an elite defender. He's a very good defender. I wouldn't say he was even in the discussion for me for all defensive team. But it's the offensive... What's the word I'm thinking of? The offensive misunderstanding or no self-realization of what you are. And that is where the problem is with Dillon Brooks. And Dillon Brooks still has that problem. I want to go to a new team because I want a larger role. My guy, what are you talking about? And Dort, 31 minutes, 20 usage. 20 usage is not super high. He should be a 13 usage player. He should be a 15 usage player. He averaged 14 points with 2 threes. He had 4 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal. So despite being a good defender, he's not a good defensive stats player. And he shot 39% from the field. 33% from 3. But he couldn't finish at the rim. He couldn't get layups. He couldn't shoot anything. He's bad. And he takes too many shots. But defensively, he is really good. And that keeps these numbers up. Estimated wins, plus 5.8. That's great. Positive EPM, 78th percentile. LeBron in the 50th percentile compared to starters. Darko doesn't love him. Negative 0.9. It's 260th. And you can see that graph. There were improvements, but he's still a negative player. But the thing with him is he's never going to be a fantasy category league guy. He's probably never going to be a relevant points league guy from here on out because not only should he not play 31 minutes a night, he shouldn't have 20% usage. And he doesn't get rebounds, assists, steals, or blocks. So I don't know what he does. He's not Andre Robertson on offense. He's not Isaac Okoro on offense. But maybe he should be more like Isaac Okoro on offense. A guy that just stops taking these shots because he can't do it. And that's always going to be a problem. But the thing with this team is that with the arrival of Chet and another lottery pick and Jaylin Williams playing this well, there's easy ways to not play him these minutes. So when we're looking at Lu Dort, who is only 24, and I've got into many arguments with people about Lu Dort's fantasy value in the past all the time. So people will still believe in him improving and being this good guy when he isn't. And I don't really ever see it coming. And I just think that lack of self-awareness about what you can and can't or shouldn't do on offense is going to push him into a smaller role. His EPM was okay, like it's around average. It did drop a little bit as the season went on, but not a huge amount for us to tell from there. This guy is the opposite Lu Dort, and that's the Oklahoma City mudflap, Kenrich Williams. He was only 202nd in category leagues per game, 204th in points leagues. He wasn't drafted, of course. His season ended early due to wrist surgery. He was playing really, really well. When people saw the wrist surgery thing there, they just said, well, that's it, the Thunder are tanking. And he was part, along with Poku, and along with Robinson-Earl, along with Pig Williams, at this situation where they wouldn't start the same center every game. They would rotate guys through. Invariably, Kenrich would still get 26 a night. Well, that's not true, not 26, because he only averaged 23. He'd get good minutes most nights, coming off the bench or starting, but there was no consistency there. But he has proven over many seasons that when he plays, he is a winning player, a winning positive contributor. 8 points, a 3, 5 rebounds, 0.8 steals, 52% shooting, 37 from the line, 37 from 3, 44 from the line, which is obviously disgusting. 1.7 EPM, 126th in Darko. LeBron doesn't love him, but the other stats do, and he had big improvements there. He just provides winning basketball. But he's never going to be a solid fantasy option because he just doesn't generate enough stats. And at age 28, when we're looking at, again, the arrival of Chet, and the blossoming of Jaylin Williams, is that I don't really know where his role is. Could he be the perfect backup 4/5 playing 20 minutes again next season? Yeah, I think he's really good at it. But there's not much in terms of fantasy value there for him. He'll have the occasional big game, but it's just not consistent enough or reliable enough. And the starts that he got this season are probably not going to be anything that happens again. You can see he had that stretch towards the end of the season where he missed games. He had a few DMPs in the middle of the season. But overall, just a positive contributor on the court. Let's talk about Isaiah Joe, who the Thunder got for free because the Sixers waived him. I wouldn't have waived him as the Sixers. They did get into a roster crunch. They waived 2 guys who I really liked in Isaiah Joe and Charles Bassey, who went on to have success this season. I would have waived someone like a Shake Milton. I probably even would have waived Jaden Springer if I was Philadelphia, although Springer showed a little bit towards the end of the season. He's on my dynasty watch list, Jaden Springer. But Joe was a revelation here. But being a revelation in terms of your production, which he was, didn't really translate into fantasy goodness all season. 245th in category leagues, 256th in points leagues. He's only 24. 73 games, 19 minutes, 18% usage, 9 points, but 2 threes a game, over 2 threes. We talk about getting threes off the waiver wire. Very easy to do. This is one of the guys. But everything else, nothing there. 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 0.7 steals. He shot 41% from 3, 82 from the line. His advanced stuff is unbelievably good. 110th best player in Darko. 79th percentile EPM. Look at that graph. Look at how positive he was all season. Because he is a reliable shooter. And when Shai went down or Shai was out, he would step up. And he would have some stinkers. There's no denying that. Because he's a young player who's not that good. So inconsistency is going to be a problem. But he showed to me that he can have a career... I was going to say like a Max Strus, but I don't think that's the right comparison. Best case scenario, can he beat Jason Terry? A guy that can handle the ball a little bit, but just bombs threes and is sort of a borderline fantasy guy? Yeah. But again, the problem is with this team, are there enough minutes for him? They're going to get into a situation where they have to make consolidation moves, where 29 other teams will value Isaiah Joe more than the role that Thunder are playing him. And then you can turn that and him and someone else into something better. Perhaps. That's going to be a problem. So, despite this breakout from Isaiah Joe, which it was, he still only played 19 minutes a game. And with Giddey, Williams, Shai, unbelievably Dort still ahead of him, I don't really see the path to that clearing up. He is the same age as Lou Dort. And I think he's just going to be fight. Look, he passed a lot of guys on this depth chart, easily. But overall, the fantasy game is a little bit limited to being an elite three-point shooter with not much else. Fantasy points graph shows the improvement as the season went on. EPM graph doesn't show that, just shows he's been pretty solid all season. And one of the things that's positive about him, and think back to even like an Anthony Morrow, who used to be a Thunder player, if you remember him, Warriors player. He just gets up threes. He's going to get up tons of them. I think he averaged like 13 per 36. He's going to get up tons of threes. And that's, when you're hitting him at that rate, shooting that many threes is a key part. That's why his advanced stuff is so good. It's because that spacing scrambles everything. It makes the defense go, holy shit, Isaiah Joe is shooting. That's a great role. It's an impactful player. But the other struggles in minutes and usage and every other stat, I think overall limits him for fantasy. Let's talk Pig Williams now. You want to know why I call him Pig Williams? I'm sure some of you do, some of you don't. Because I want to differentiate between him and the Bronco Jaylin Williams. And calling one J-Dub and J-Will doesn't do anything. When you could easily say that this guy's nickname is J-Dub or it's J-Will. And if you don't know, you don't know. But if you call one the Bronco, because he went to Santa Clara and their mascot's the Bronco, if you call one Pig, because he went to Arkansas and their mascot's a pig, well, I think that helps. So that's why I do it. Rather than having to say, well, it's tall Jaylin Williams or it's J-Will. You go, which one's J-Will? Is it J-Will or J? I know that eventually we know. I know who J-Dub is and J-Will is, but it's a stupid differentiator because they're the same nickname. Anyway, Vietnamese legend Jaylin Williams was a bit of an afterthought to begin the season. I wasn't that high on him. But by the end of the season, I was impressed. 262nd in category leagues. He's only 21. Well, he's not even 21. He'll be 21 next season. Played 49 games, 19 minutes, 13 usage. And he was part of that conglomerate of rotating centers. But by the end of the season, he won out. Now, it did help that Kenrich Williams was injured, but he won out. He was ahead of Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. But remember, this time last year, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl was the second-round center that they unearthed. And this season, it's Pig Williams. And next season, it'll be the number 2 overall pick. So while it was impressive to see what he did, and he shot 41% from 3, which is great, but as a center averaging 0.2 blocks and shooting 44 from the field are gigantic red flags. So while we can look at this and go, that was impressive what Pig Williams was able to do, 41% shooting from 3 is great. Mate, block a shot. Once a month would be good. If you could block a shot, I'd love that. Or finish anything that's not a 3. He averaged 6 points with a 3, 5 rebounds, 0.6 steals in 19 minutes. Not a bad number there. 0.2 blocks is horrific. 70 from the line. And the advanced numbers are really bad. 5th percentile in estimated wins, negative 0.8. 380th in Darko, you can see that. So while we saw improvement from him, and the Darko graph and the advanced stats here is going to contrast what we saw from the fantasy points graph, where he barely played, and then you see a lot more consistency in minutes and production. Did what Jaylin Williams, Pig Williams do this season mean that they've got that sorted? No, because he is going to lose tons with Chet arriving, and he'll be in like a weird backup mishmash with Kenrich and Poku and Robinson-Earl again. So while the shooting is great, there's still plenty of holes in his game, and ideally he's a backup. Like he's not. I don't think he's a future starter. And I think we're going to see, well, we expect lots of guys to improve second year. I'm not sure that he does. Nice little spike here in the middle with his EPM, but overall, it was, the advanced stuff was pretty disappointed in his overall production. That does bring us on to the old Joe Rogan experience, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, who, as a second-round player the year before, was a surprise. Oh, look at 6'9" center, pick second round. The Thunder keep doing it. And that's great to get viable players in the second round. And I'm not even going to talk about Aaron Wiggins, who was a second round player that they got value out of this season. I'm not even going to go through it. There's just too many guys to go through on this team. But Robinson-Earl still, I think, struggled. He started quite a few games, then got injured with a significant ankle injury in the middle of the season. But still, he's not the answer to anything. He's not the answer to any team's starting question. Can I start this guy and be a good player as a power forward or center? I think the answer is no. 19 minutes for him. He is 22 only, so there's still room to improve. 15 usage, 7 points, a 3, but 4 rebounds, 0.6 steals, 0.3 blocks, 44% shooting, 83 from the line. Like as a center, block some shots, hit some shots, get some rebounds. He's just going to sort of fade into obscurity here, I think. It's a good story, but as we get better, you sort of push away. The advanced stats are a little bit more positive on him than they were on Pig Williams, but they're still not awesome. They're okay, though. And you can see big improvements in his Darko there. -1 on Darko, -0.4 EPM, 65th percentile. He's okay. Like, he's solid. When he's out there, you go, I'm not going to get killed. But it's also like, I don't want to believe that he is a long-term option for us. You can see that big absence in the middle of the season with an ankle problem. And he probably was playing out of position most of his career in OKC as a center when he's probably more of a 4. But I need to see... I don't see anything that makes me think that he's any sort of future starter in the NBA. He did start out all right with his advanced stuff, and then when he came back from injury, struggled. So I give him a pass on that. Coming back from a severe ankle injury is really hard to get your rhythm back. So maybe he can be more impactful. But again, look, there's no burst, there's no excitement from him to make me think, yeah, there's something big coming. And I 100% double up my thought process on that for this guy, Trey Mann. Because I didn't like him as a draft pick. I didn't like what I saw from him last season, and I hated what I saw this season. I just don't think that he is a winning NBA player. Yes, he was a first-round pick. I wouldn't have picked him where they picked him. I know a lot of people have disagreeing opinions to me on Trey Mann. They really think that, well, he's a bucket, and it's cool. They love that sort of thing with a player. I just don't with him. And he was overtaken by Isaiah Joe this season, and I don't really see a viable path for him being a future starter in the NBA. He was 329th in category leagues. He played only 18 minutes with a 20 usage, 67 games. He averaged 8 points on 39% shooting. He hit 32% from 3, under 2 assists, 0.6 steals. Like, what does he do? He can have the occasional good game, as many players can, where multiple players go down and he's forced into a large usage role and he can go off 1 game or 2 games. But you lost your rotation spot at times to Isaiah Joe. You are so far down the pecking order. Yes, it's only 2 years in for him, but the advanced stuff is rough. His Darko got worse as a second-year player, which is not a great sign. He's 385th in that, 24th percentile on EPM, a negative estimated wins guy. He's just not a rotation player. And my faith in him ever getting to that is really, really low. Always remember, though, when I'm talking about a player like Trey Mann, understand that we all have biases. I do. I didn't like him as a player coming into the NBA. I didn't like what I saw from him as a rookie. So when I say I don't really see why any team would want to prioritize him as a rotation player or starter, it's fueled by all those things, which I feel have been backed up over these last couple of seasons. So I'm not going to say, in the right situation. I just don't believe you'll ever find the right situation because I don't think he's good enough. And if he is, that team probably wins 8 games. But that's me being harsh. Probably a little bit harsh. And players can change, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I just have never seen it from Trey Mann to believe in it. And I definitely don't think it's happening on this team. His EPM graph is pretty troubling as it's, as down the end of the season, see how that drops off. That's when he got more minutes. So he got more minutes because there was a few injuries there and he played worse or his impact was worse. Not a great sign. I'm not going to write off this next player, which is the last guy we're going to talk about, and that's Ousmane Dieng. It was a bold pick at pick 12, pick 11. I think they picked him before Jaylin Williams. They had the 2 picks in a row, whatever, around that pick. It was a bold pick. He didn't show me huge amounts, though. 393rd in category leagues, 371st in points leagues for Ousmane. He is 20 years of age. 39 games, 15 minutes, 16 usage, 5 points, 27% from 3. The big thing with Dieng was, can he shoot? Because in Australia, playing for New Zealand, he couldn't shoot. Can't shoot now. 65% from the line, 42% overall, 0.4 steals, 1 assist. And part of the thing was, hey, this guy can sort of play like a point forward, a 6'9" point guard at times. And we saw the shooting improve over the final 10 games, or whatever it was in New Zealand. It just didn't show out. And his advanced stats are all really bad. No real improvement. But to be fair to him, and I think I am because it wasn't a great season, he's still a long way away. I have more faith in him than Trey Mann, though. Like, don't get me too wrong on that. Like, I have more faith in him than what Trey Mann can do. Towards the end of the season, which we can see here on this fantasy points graph, he got into the rotation. I wouldn't say he produced great numbers, but he at least looked like he could hang. He was barely playing at all to begin the season. But towards the end of the season, he got in the rotation and he started to do some things. He played only 9 games in the G League. In those G League games, 35 minutes, 17 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 35% shooting from 3 on 7 attempts per game. And that is awesome. Rebounding, passing, scoring, shooting. Still only hit 40% from the line, but all that stuff is awesome. Is it enough, though? Because it obviously didn't translate to the NBA. He was better towards the end of the season. I'm not writing him off. He's 20. So I'd like to see 3 years out of him probably, or at least get to age 22 before I'm fully writing off a top 12 pick. But the concerns that we had for him as a poor efficiency guy and some of the strengths we thought he might show as a ball handler the negatives didn't fix and the positive didn't show. So it was a bad season. And the path to clear minutes on this team are not there. Like, can he be a rotation guy next season? Sure. But the likelihood is that pick 12 or a top 4 pick plays his position. Keontae George, Anthony Black, not really his position. Nick Smith, Bryce Sensible, which would be bad for Isaiah Joe. Go up in the top 4. Brandon Miller. Like, they're all his position. He didn't show enough to make me think that the future is bright for Dieng. He was okay, and he had some okay moments, but nothing really moved my needle. And that will do it for me today. Don't forget, follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app and on YouTube. Please thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.